This is The Backstory with Omobola Stephen. It's a balanced, objective, unbiased and disruptive conversation on government and politics. We shine more light on what has not worked and what would make it work. And now, to the finest personable and engaging host extraordinaire, Omobola Stephen. Tune in.
Thanks for tuning into our podcast. We love having you here, and it's our mission to bring you all the latest and greatest tips, skills, and know-how to make you the best that you can be. We know that you have it in you, and we're going to show you how. Now, let's get started.
Good to have you on the Backstory with Omobola Stephen. I'm your host, Omobola Stephen. On the Backstory, we focus on government and politics with other subtopics like the environment, science and technology, society, and culture. Now, we like to shine more light on what has not worked and what will make it work. Today, I have Ethan Brown on the Backstory, who is the host of PBS podcast, The Sweaty Penguin, a comedy environment podcast. Welcome to the show, Ethan Brown.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you on, Eden. The first question I would like to ask you is that you make climate change less politicized. Now, how on earth did you achieve that?
So I grew up in a town that was a smaller town in Connecticut, kind of half more on the left and half more on the right. And so I was kind of exposed to people of different political perspectives all my life. And I really enjoyed listening to people of different perspectives and learning about what makes people think the way that they do. So that was really helpful when I got into the climate world. And what I found is feelings of climate doom, of climate denial, of climate indifference. These are things that we think of as polar opposites, but I find that they all stem from a very similar feeling of fear and anxiety and sometimes guilt, where climate news is just so overwhelming that it's hard to even learn about it. It's hard to engage with it. And so people have these different response mechanisms. They either feel like all hope is lost or they just tune out the whole thing entirely. And so what I did in creating The Sweaty Penguin is I used comedy, I used solutions journalism, I used critical thinking and nuance to really try to break down that initial fear and anxiety. And when I do that, I find that people from all political perspectives can start to engage in the conversation and find common ground.
All right, now, still talking about politics, how can we begin to separate facts from politics when it comes to addressing the environment?
Yeah, so I think that there's a real open debate when it comes to solutions. How do we address these climate challenges? And the more that we can move the conversation away from, is this real? Does this matter? Like, the more that we're questioning the problem, that's not as productive a conversation. And so to move away from that, it really takes showing people that there are a wide variety of climate solutions out there. It's not all bans and regulations. That there are options like that can be effective, but there are other options too. And to show people the full slate of options and show the pros and cons of those options and let people think about which ones they like, which ones they don't like. That's where I find that people from any political perspective, once they see a solution they like, suddenly they aren't anxious. And so they don't deny the problem. They don't try to shy away from it. They say, oh, this is a really cool solution. Let's do this. So that's what I really try to do in my work, is present all those options, present the pros and cons, and then let people think for themselves.
Right. I like to emphasize more on politics and also the environment. Now, political features on climate issues extend far beyond beliefs about whether climate change is occurring and whether humans are playing the role. What's your own thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that something that really excites me about climate solutions and climate policy is just that there are ways that these solutions can not just help the environment, but help the economy, help justice, help health, help national security, help all these different things that we care about. In the most recent Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, they took, I believe it was 42 different climate solutions and very broad categories, things like solar power or reforestation, like really big things, and compared them against the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, which are, again, very broad ideas, things like innovation, gender equality, very universally desired things. And they compared each solution to each goal to see if there were synergies, if there were trade-offs, or if there was a combination of the two. And they found out of 400 something combinations, only 12 had trade-offs. The others were either synergies or a combination of the two, and most were purely synergies. So again, that just gives a sense of how these solutions aren't just about climate. They're not always sacrifices. They can really help everything else we care about.
All right, thanks, Ethan, for sharing that thought with us. Now, is technology impacting the environment really as the way it should?
Yeah, of course. It depends on how broad you go with your definition of technology, because of course any energy source we can say is technology. We can say the way we power our homes is technology. Cars and vehicles are technology. But to get to more what we think of like computers and that kind of thing, that all has an environmental impact too. These machines use a lot of energy. Data centers are a big factor. We did an episode on artificial intelligence on our podcast and found that some of the developments in AI are creating a lot of emissions. But technology is a two-sided thing, because technology is also where a lot of solutions take place. It's largely what excites me is that we can address climate change through a lot of technological innovations. A lot of clean energy sources like solar and wind and what have you are technological innovations, and these sources have improved dramatically from where they started. Today, it is often cheaper to use these cleaner energy sources than fossil fuel alternatives. We can say it about electric vehicles. We can say it about all these different ideas. These are technological innovations that can not just help the climate, but also make our life better. And I think that's really exciting.
Right now, talking about making a life better, how can we achieve environmental health? Now, alongside having elderly people on the side of the eternity.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? It cut out a little bit.
The question is, how can we achieve environmental health alongside having elderly people? Is it possible in this 21st century, alongside all the change that is happening globally?
I think it's very possible, because I think, again, it aligns with every other goal. These things are not competing with each other the way I think they're sometimes made out to be. For example, we did an episode on worker productivity, which I think is a strange title, but we found that people who are exposed to a variety of different pollutants can often, it leads to lower productivity at work. It can impact what wages you end up getting. It can impact how you move up in a company, all just because of different levels of particles in the environment on a given day. People's productivity changes. If they're just sniffling, they may not work as well. So that was just one small example. Another thing we do is we go look at different regions that have major oil and gas development and look at the issues that are happening there and some solutions there. And that too, we find that these projects have a lot of public health concerns where pollutants are coming out of these: air pollutants, water pollutants, noise pollution. But then there's also solutions, and these solutions can help these communities both from a public health perspective and an environmental perspective and an economic perspective and a justice perspective. So I really do think it's all tied together, and that's why, I guess, to answer your question, I have a lot of hope, because it just makes sense to address all of these things together.
Ethan, let me ask this interesting question. What do you think will happen to Earth after 1,000 years?
Like 1,000 years from now?
Yeah.
Wow, that's an interesting question. I think it's really hard to say, because if we think about 1,000 years ago today, the world was so different, and I don't think anyone could fathom a lot of what we have today. I think that certainly as climate goes, I do have a lot of hope that we will rein in carbon emissions to an extent where I mean, there's already so much climate damage. I don't want to say that there would not be any, of course, but I think that given the progress of a lot of clean energy technologies, given I'd see a lot of countries seem to have a desire to address this issue. So I think we're going to make a lot more progress than maybe a lot of other people think. I think that by the end of the century, we will have improved to a point where we're talking less about how to mitigate climate change and more about how we can actually become carbon negative and take carbon out of the atmosphere and start to cool the planet back to its pre-industrial state. That said, climate does vary naturally as well. So I don't know what will happen 1,000 years from now, but I do know that history is very often impacted by the way climate changes. If we look at a lot of transitions from, say, the medieval times to the Renaissance in Europe, the climate had a pretty dramatic cooling around that transition, and that led to a lot of the changes in agriculture and art and just general international relations. So yeah, hard for me to make a prediction, but there's a lot of interesting stuff to think about for sure.
Absolutely. Ethan, do you have any exciting news or any projects you'd like for my audience to know about?
Well, I definitely encourage people to check out The Sweaty Penguin. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, on Apple, Spotify, etc. We're at thesweatypenguin.com as well. We also have a Patreon page, patreon.com/thesweatypenguin, where we have merch, we have bonus content. We're doing a lot more on there. We're getting close to a goal of 25 patrons, where once we hit that, we'll be raffling off signed books from experts that we've had on the show. So that's a exciting thing that I hope we'll get to that early next year. And once we do, if you're one of our patrons, you will get to be a part of that. And then what else? We're coming out with a new website soon. We've got a lot of cool stuff in the works. I don't want to spoil too many things, but come follow us and you'll be part of the fun.
I like that perspective, Ethan. Like us, we like to know your website and also your social media handles, if you want to share that with us.
Yes, we are at www.thesweatypenguin.com. On social media, we are on Instagram and TikTok at Sweaty Penguin Pod. On Twitter, we are at Sweat Penguin Pod. And we're also on Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. So yeah, come find us. We've got lots of great climate content.
Sure. Thanks for joining me on the show, Ethan Brown. You're the host of the PBS podcast, The Sweaty Penguin, which is a comedy environment podcast. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on today's show, especially talking about politics and also the environment, which is a very important topic for such time as this. I wish you best of luck once again, Eden, in all that you embark on.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and best of luck to you too.
I appreciate once again. If you'd like to catch up with any missed episodes of The Backstory, you can do so on any cross-promotion platforms or any distribution platforms you bump into online. And do have a great time as you listen to experts and professionals share their thoughts on subjects or topics on the government and politics, and other subtopics like the environment, society and culture, and science and technology. I need to stay safe always. I talk to you, sir.